Today's gospel, Jesus gives us some good advice. He says to beware. Beware of those whose self-centeredness, self-love, selfish love, if you will, where that has taken the place of the love of God. And in the gospel, he gives us some examples of what he means by that. Those who walk around wearing good, fine clothes, long robes, and they go into the marketplace and say, "Hi, everybody, look at me." All right, and they take their places at the banquets or in the synagogue thinking, I am up here on the podium, I'm up here in I'm in the prominent spot up here. It says, beware of those kinds of people who are centered on themselves. Beware. He says this for two reasons. The first is that their love of themselves has taken the place of the love of God. Their self-centeredness, their selfish love has taken the place of their love of God. And so when they do that, we lose our center. Because God, we believe, is at our center. And when we lose our center, well then it's time to watch out. Beware. Because people who have lost their center have lost also a chance of their integrity. I was at a concert some time ago and walked out, and the woman is a very popular singer, and I liked her music. She walks out, and everybody applaud, whistling and everything else, and then she says, "Give me some more love. Give me more love." And I went like this, and I stopped clapping. What's going on? When we're more concerned about ourselves, our self-centeredness, than we are about God, there's a problem. Beware. You ever seen any politicians like that? Beware. Lost their integrity. 3 months ago they said this, and now they're saying something that was completely different, and well, why is that? Maybe they've lost their center, their integrity of knowing what they are, who they are, and what they believe in. Beware. And also, he says, beware, because those who look at themselves selfishly and self-centeredly, they're also dangerous for other people. They have replaced their own selfishness and instead don't love others. So, the examples Jesus gives in here are just terrible ones, where they say that the scribes have figured out ways to get money out of people, even the poor and outcast widow who has nothing, doesn't even have enough to live on. But if it says they use prayer as a pretext to get more money. And then it says he went down and sat opposite the treasury. And the commentators say when it says they sat opposite the treasury, it means that he was opposing the kind of process that was going on in that treasury, where they're trying to get you, they devour the houses of widows. Did you hear that? And the widow comes up to her own credit. She's willing to open her life to the trust in God by giving all she has. But God would never ask us to go destitute to support the temple. He wouldn't ask us to walk around in sackcloth to support the temple. And this is an example of religion gone bad. People lose their center and lose their love for others because of their own selfish interests. Religion gone bad. And we know something about that ourselves, don't we? So, Jesus also is hinting at that we need to beware ourselves of these things going wrong in us. That our own selfishness, self-centeredness could take the place of our true love for God and others. And so really what it's directing us to is to know that we belong to God. And just going through the motions is not what God wants. God wants our hearts. And When we just go through the motions, it is of little use. I have a friend of mine, one of the friars. We used to go vacationing together a lot, and when we did so on weekends, we'd go to church on Sunday, and sometimes we could be coming out of church, and he'd look at me and say, well, we got our obligation out of the way. Now, he's being facetious, okay? But when saying our prayers and just going to church is all we require of ourselves, we need to know that God wants our hearts and not that. Not just our presence. And someone might say to me, well, Father, I've been praying for 40 years. What are you talking about? Well, I'll tell you, I've been praying for longer than 40 years. And I know what I'm talking about. Because we can come to those times in our lives when we just go through the motions. God wants our hearts. He wants us to open our hearts to Him so that He might offer us His guidance, His wisdom. So we might do that by listening to His Word and let that Word form us. We do so by being attentive to those movements that kind of prompt us to do good and avoid evil. And we find out that we're actually in a relationship with Him. That we sense His presence in our lives and His direction. That's what He wants. And the second thing is for us to know that we belong to one another. And in that knowing that we belong to one another, it means that we are to reach out to them and to help care for them. So how can we do that? Well, I found a way that works more for me now than it used to maybe. And that is that we look at someone else and try to see what it's like to be in their shoes. And the older I get and the more experience I have in life, the easier it is for me to do that. What's it like to live in their shoes or to be in that hospital bed? What's it like? Saw a woman this week. She had just undergone back surgery, and so I went to visit her, and I said, how's it going? She says, well, the surgery went okay, but that anesthesia and the drugs I'm on, it just makes me crazy. You know what I mean? And I looked at her and said, yeah, I do. I know what you mean. And to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of someone who is struggling financially, someone even who's on the street corner begging. And instead of saying, get a job, we could say, I wonder what it's like to be on that street corner begging. We could say, well, it's his own fault. I didn't ask you that. What would it like to be an addict and be on the street corner begging? What would that be like? And in that, at least for me, it calls forward a different sense, a different experience of how I respect another person. And something else, too. Some years ago, decades ago, I was home visiting my mom. At that time, she was widowed, living on a fixed income, and had been sick. And so I'd spend some time with her, usually spend about a week during the summer, and I went back to the parish where I was, and I went to visit somebody in the hospital, an older woman about the age of my mother. And I looked at her as I would look at my mother and said, if that was my mom, how would I treat her? What would I say? And I decided to do that. And now I do that when I visit anybody. But what's it like to be her? What if she was my mom, he my dad, my brother, my sister, my niece, my nephew? How would I speak to them then? And that's a good indication of how we are to live our lives, reaching out to others, understanding where they're coming from. Because you see, that's what our faith is all about, that we live with open hearts to God and that we reach out in love, out of compassion to others. It is how we are called to live. And it is the faith these people, these 4 people today, are being called into this church to live that life.